So this evening we just look at this idea of numerology, principles and practice. I don't know why I called it that. I just had to make the title extend a bit more. Um, and as many of you know, this recording will end up on the membership site, so you can watch it again and again. And there is also on the membership site a copy of my book on numerology, which you can download for free because you're a member of the site. So here we go. Let's go into it. Um, the things that I think are interesting about numerology, just to get us thinking about it, is apparently the word numerology in terms of English, the reference in English, doesn't appear before 1907, which did surprise me when I found that fact. Prior to that, in the 1570s, it was known as arithmancy, uh, from the Greek word meaning number and meaning divination. And then before that, certain religious systems, Jewish religious systems, used to call this stuff gematria, where they assigned numbers to words and gave them religious meaning. And that goes way back to at least the 8th, 9th century BC. So this thing called numerology has been around in various guises for a long time. And as we'll see in a moment, it's existed in various ways in different cultures too. So first of all, is to ground us in that we're talking here about the fact that numbers have a significance to life. Numbers reveal patterns in our lives and in the spiritual life too, and it's been around a long time. In fact, numerology, astrology, for me, go hand in hand, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. One of the earliest references to um, the use of numbers having meaning is on the tomb of Sargon II. And the quote that they've discovered there, the king built the wall of Koshbad 16,283 cubits long to correspond with the numerical value of his name. And this is one of the early references where we get there's a belief system that numbers and names of things are important and allow you to understand the nature of the thing that you've given the number to. And this guy was born around about sort of 770 BC. And so this is an early reference from the Syrian tomb. The other thing that's interesting is that Pythagoras is a name that most of us can think about in terms of knowing the name Pythagoras. So he's the guy that put all of us into apoplexy at school mathematics, trying to work out what he really meant by the sum of the other true triangles on the other three sides or whatever. The thing we need to know about Pythagoras is that he wasn't just a mathematician, he was a mystic or philosopher, magician, whatever you want to call this guy, an occultist, because it wasn't just about Pythagoras on his own. Pythagoras, or the Pythagorean teachings, produced a cult of which there were two groups of membership. One was the people of the higher status, who were the ascetics that were studying mathematics and relation of numbers, and the other people were the people that followed these people but didn't actually live their lives to the letter of the number, if that makes sense. Pythagoras is a fascinating character. Is interested in natural philosophy, is interested in maths, is interested in music, is his ideas of the intervals of music and the music of the spheres had a great influence on thinking, even thinking today. If you're a musician, hang on a sec, let me just do this. If you're a musician, you will certainly be aware of the importance of some of the ideas in theory of his theory being applied to music. So Pythagoras played with numbers, and we'll talk about his system a little bit more in a sec. I've just got to move a message. Here we go. Right. Sorry, I'm playing around with this because I'm having a bit of a problem. There we go. My There we go. Get rid of that. There we go. So that's Pythagoras, and we'll come back to him in a moment because one of the systems of numerology that's really important was invented by or used by Pythagoras and his mathematical cult. There we go. Um, Gematria, well, that was the practice of assigning numerical values to names, words, or phrases according to some kind of cipher. And this is the Jewish culture and Jewish spirituality was expressed in terms of relationship to words, names, and numbers, which is why in a lot of occult teachings or mystical teachings, the number and the name are equally important. Um, and we'll talk a bit about gematria in a moment, but it's kind of interesting that this use of assigning certain numbers to certain letters or words um, was a common practice, and especially something that was taught um, in the higher forms of Judaic teaching. So people who studied not just the Torah but beyond the Torah, they would have actually started to study gematria. Let's call it numerology. Um, we know that one of the kings of Judea actually had his coins minted to commemorate his 20th and 25th year of the reign, using the letters K and KE, and they're on the coins. We know that there's a sample of graffiti at Pompeii which reads, "I love the girl whose name is Phi Mu Epsilon," which is 545. So here we get an idea that names and numbers were actually linked. The essence of a thing is not only in its name, but it's in its number. There is a great controversy over things called Bible codes. Now, certainly in the 20th century, a number of books have been written trying to tell you that there are hidden messages um, within the Bible. And these hidden messages are apocalyptic in nature, or they're kind of announcing the secrets, the true secrets of the biblical texts. I'm a bit skeptical about some of them, but what we can say for definite is that numbers feature heavily within the Bible and biblical texts. There's 7 days of creation. There's a lunar cycle of 7.4 days. There's a week of 7 days. The number of candles of the menorah are all about 7. That symbolism is there for a reason. There are 12 disciples, 12 months, 12 tribes of Israel. On the Hoshen, the breastplate that the high priest used to wear, there are 12 gemstones depicting the 12 tribes of Israel. Interestingly, in the Old Testament, you will find a reference to a description of what gems should be on the Hoshen, on the breastplate. And in the New Testament, in the book of Revelations, you find a new layout of gemstones on the Hoshen, the breastplate, where the gemstones have been altered. Some people read a lot of significance into that. 12 tribes of Israel represented by 12 gemstones, all represented on the Hoshen, the breastplate, which changes after the book of Revelation. And of course, 40 is also a big number that crops up all the time in the Bible. You know, David and Solomon ruled for 40 years. Moses was 40 years old when he was exiled. He returned 40 years later. He led the Jewish people out of Egypt, spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, receiving the commandments and stuff, and wandered in the desert for 40 years. Okay, 40 days and 40 nights was the length of the flood. These numbers exist, and they're not just there for storytelling purposes. Many people believe that they're there for symbolic reasons and meanings, which I hold a lot of sympathy towards. Perhaps the most famous biblical reference of all is 666, largely due to, I think it was Iron Maiden or something producing the number of the beast. But we know that the book of Revelation says that 666 is the man's number, the number of a man associated with the beast. And the beast is often seen as being an antichrist in lots of apocalyptic literature. In fact, if you're into your horror movies, the whole sequence of films called The Omen were all about Damien Thorne having 666 on his head. And a bit of trivia here is in the very first Omen movie, the one with Gregory Peck in, if you remember that far back, I taught the lad who played Damien. There we go. And he was a little terror at school when I was teaching him. He was a bit older when I was teaching him, but there we go. But this 666 number is really important because it's the way that in our psyche we can identify and relate to numbers. There is even a phobia named after 666, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it. It's there across the bottom, but with the number of hexes in it, it means sixes. But there's a phobia. People have a phobic response to number 666. Interestingly enough, the Aleister Crowley, who is an occultist that many of you will have heard about because I've spoken about him before, his book of numbers, his book of correspondences is called 777, which is interesting because in Gematria, in Jewish tradition, 777, 7 was perfection. That is finality. That is the summation of creation. 7 days it took to create the world and that kind of stuff. 666 is not quite creation, if that makes any sense. It's not quite the finished product. It's one before 7. It's like having, 6 days of the week instead of the 7th, which wraps up that week. And these connections that we make between numbers are really, really important because they become cultural reference points as well as any spiritual reference points that we may have. The full quote from Revelations is there: let him that hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it's the number of man. Well, the word reckon comes from the Greek solve or calculate. And this is interesting too, because that is not to be taken directly. It means, what is the riddle of 666? If you interpret that according to a potential meaning, it's work out the number of the beast. Well, if you translate the Hebrew spelling of 666, you spell out Neron Kazar, which is the Hebrew spelling of Nero Caesar. It is suggested that at the time of the writing, this particular individual who was writing, maybe it was John, I don't know, writing the book of Revelations, was talking about the apocalypse. And rather than mentioning Nero, who was a particularly despotic and probably insane Caesar, actually coded the name of Nero as 666. Not quite complete, not quite perfect, maybe his bestial behavior made them think of the man that wasn't properly formed. But we do know that this is a strong possibility, because what person in the right mind is going to criticize a major leader in their writings? They're not going to sort of say, Nero is a complete not a git. Let's call him a beast and let's give him the number 666. Stuff to think about. In Egyptian mythology, you could look this all up yourself, but just as an example, 3 is the number of plurality. The god Aten was 1 and became 3 when he gave birth to Shu and Tefnut and the triad of Horus, Osiris, and Isis. So in Egyptian mythology, numbers have been important. The 5 was the number of this god Ra, and named 5 gods and goddesses. 7 was the number of pieces that Osiris was chopped into, and that Isis had to go and find, and she was guided by 7 scorpions. So that again, the numbers play an important part here. And of course, remember that Sumerian mythology, Egyptian mythology, Akkadian, Jewish, Canaanite mythology all share a source. So it's no surprise that numbers feature in parallel cultures. Numerology exists within Chinese mythology. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But, in terms of Chinese mythology, 0 is the beginning of all things and considered a good number. 3 is to live, or it means life, and is also considered a good number. 8 is considered an unlucky, 4 because it's an unlucky number because it's nearly, when you speak the number 4 in Chinese, it's close to the sound of the word death. But the point here I'm making is that these cultures have all used numbers to symbolize things or explore meanings of things. And if you talk to people about ideas of, do you have lucky numbers, or do you play the lottery? Do you have lucky numbers? Do you actually have what you consider to be unlucky numbers, unlucky associations with numbers? These are really important because they're culturally significant. Okay, so I'm going quite quickly because I want to get onto our discussion bit, more interesting. But I will say now, if you've got a pen and paper with you, and you've not this before, you'll get a chance to work out some numbers for yourself. And I'll try and go slowly enough for you to do them. But if you've got a pen and paper, or just a note on, you can work it out. If not, you can look at this again and work out your numbers. However, there are numbers of different methods that have survived that people use in terms of working out the numbers of things from the way the things are spelt. Good old Pythagoras, he's got a method. There's a Chinese method which we talk about. There's Chaldean method. There's the Cornelius Agrippa in his 3 books of occult philosophy produced an idea. And then there's interest from the English Kabbalah. Notice there another spelling of the word Kabbalah. And if you go back to our Kabbalah mooch, you'll understand what those things are. As in all of these systems, a letter or a word symbolizes a number. I don't have an answer for that. That was Alexa telling me you got an answer for that, so it made me get excited. So there's an association between a word, a number, and or a letter. And in the Pythagorean method, the letters of the Latin alphabet are assigned to the numerical values 1 through 9, and it looks like this. Okay, so as you can see, this grid here, once it was across top, and that was 1 to 9, and then letters of the alphabet that we would recognize written underneath each of these numbers. Okay, so A, J, and S are all equivalent to number 1, B, K, and T, number 2, C, L, and U, number 3, D, M, and V, number 4, E, N, W, and so on. What I will make sure is that on the notes to this, I'll also add these grids so you can use them. But it's not that easy. I mean, if you look at the way, not that easy, not that difficult. If you look at how this grid is laid out, 1 through 9, a top row, and then you just put down the letters in horizontal rows. Yeah, this is the system, the Pythagorean system, that most people use today when they start to look at numerology. Okay, so let that sink in for a moment, because I'm going quite quick. And I'll show you how you use it in a moment. The Chinese have a wonderful system. I love the story here. Basically, the river flooded, and the people pleaded with the river god to return the water to its banks. And to their surprise, a turtle surfaced on the river, and the people saw a pattern on its shell, a grid of 9 squares. Each square had dots adding up to numbers. But how the dots were added across the rows, either vertically, horizontal, or diagonally, the sum was 15. A diagram that was called the Low River Writing, or Lo Shu. And the turtle gave the pattern on its back as a map or grid of the natural flow of qi and the elements. This is one form of Chinese numerology. It's not surprisingly called the Lo Shu method. And as you can see here, there is a grid where the numbers are arranged. And if you're into your magic squares or your maths, you can work out that each horizontal row adds up to 15. Each vertical row adds up to 15. Each diagonal adds up to 15. It's what we would call a magic square. But numbers and magic squares are important, and they have a significance that we can explore. I'll show you how the Chinese river numerology system is worked out in a moment. But this is one that some people haven't come across, even though they may have done numerology. So it's worth bearing in mind. And this is the grid again, and inside each of the grids are some of the key words for what those numbers mean in a reading. I kind of like this system of numerology, partly because it's kind of fun to play with, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. The next form of numerology is called Chaldean. Now, Chaldean is an old-fashioned name for any of the Aramaic languages. When I first came across the word Chaldean years and years ago, I couldn't work out what it meant. And it was quite simply that nobody told me that Chaldean was this old-fashioned term for these Aramaic languages. But in the Chaldean systems of numerology, the number 9 is not used, or at least in practice. It's left out because it's thought to be divine and sacred and therefore unassignable. So in the Chaldean numerology system, you end up with something like this, with the numbers 1 to 8 and the arrangement of the letters not looking particularly logical. And that's because what this diagram tries to do is replace Latin letters for the characters or the letters that would have been used in Aramaic. So it's quite a clumsy system because of that. But this is Chaldean numerology, so you know what it is if you come across it. I don't pretend to use this system, but there's no reason why you couldn't with what I'm going to show you later. And then Cornelius Agrippa. I would say that if you're really interested in some of this magical stuff and the origins of this magical stuff, his 3 books of occult philosophy are well worth a read. You can now get them quite cheaply as a one volume with his 3 books in. And in his books, he's talking about alchemy, numerology, geomancy, all the stuff that we are kind of interested in, and really was a reference source for later occult and mystery schools. But he again mapped the letters in accordance with the Latin alphabet place value at that time. Okay, remember all of these stuff, all these things are of their time, and we have to look back and see how we can adapt them for us. So this is Cornelius Agrippa's system, game 1 to 9, but notice it now goes tens and then into hundreds. So it's 1 to 9, then 10 to 90, and then 100 to 900. It's quite a complex system. It doesn't sort of immediately flow, and there are a couple of things you need to note. The different soundings of some of these letters, as indicated here, and that the letters U, J, and W were not considered as part of the Latin alphabet at the time that he wrote this stuff, which is why they don't tend to exist in this chart. Not an overly useful chart for doing quick numerology stuff for yourself, but useful to know that it exists and it works playing with. The reason it's worth playing with, that if you look at gematria and Judaic gematria, you will see number values in the hundreds. Like we saw that quote where the name of that, the loved one in Pompeii was 590 something. Yeah. Well, how do you get 590? Because in traditional numerology, you don't have numbers over 9. So it's well worth looking at this system if you really want to get deeply into it. And then lastly, the English Kabbalah system actually was developed as late as 1976, that long hot summer with all the ladybirds. And it's a system, I've got to stop at this point, but the reason I think the occult and studying of the occult and the mystery traditions is important is they're not fixed. They evolve, and they evolve to the understandings of the time. So for me, this system that was developed in 1976 isn't a problem because it's so young, and it doesn't mean it has any less validity than something that was developed 500 years ago, 600 years ago, because things need to evolve in terms of our understanding according to the times in which we live. So although James Lees developed the system in 76, the reason the system was developed was to try to find insights into some of Crowley's work in the Book of the Law. Now that's a whole topic in and of itself. But what I've just said there is quite important. One of the functions of numerology is to look for deeper meanings within the letters and the words that have been written. Not to say that those things are true or the real truth behind the writing, but to say that they give us insights. And some of these magical writers, not all, no, actually, I say mostly, most of these magical writers were actually very skilled at creating ways of telling you one level of telling people one level of material, and then offer in the same text a deeper level of understanding for those who knew the references, which is the way that uh, mystery teachings have always happened. There's one set of stories for the people that are generally listening, and there's a deeper significance of the stories for the people who are really trying to understand. The whole of the teachings of Jesus in the Bible includes is about parables. The parables can be taken at face value, but there's a deeper meaning behind them if you bother to look. And the problem with I see a lot of mystery schools and that kind of stuff is that they're giving you the superficial information, but not inviting you to look deeper for your own meaning, okay, and your own connections. And that's the crucial thing here. But the English Kabbalah number system looks like this. Um, and you will notice that the numbers are literally one number per letter going all the way to 25. Yeah. Not 26, because it starts with 0. So the 26 letters of the English alphabet are given a number, and that number is. Now, I don't want to overload this for you, but if you know your tarot, you know that 0 is the Fool, and the letter that goes with the Fool is the Hebrew letter Aleph, A. Ah. So if you're really interested in this stuff, you want to try and lay out your tarot cards and your tree of life, the Kabbalah, which we talked about a session or two ago, and see where this system overlays with that. And this is what we're talking about here, guys. We're talking about a system to enhance understanding rather than a system that in and of itself is fundamentally true. So in modern numerology, I say that because this is the one that I use and play with a lot. We use the Pythagorean-based system as is here. So 1 to 9 and the letters written underneath in order going left to right. Okay, so D, M, and V are all the number 4. The word fox is number 6. That in and of itself is quite interesting, isn't it? I hadn't noticed that before, but seeing it big like this, yeah, the whole word fox is number 6. And it's 3 sixes. Ooh, 666. And again, this kind of mental playing is what I believe numerology is all about. So in the next few pages, we're going to talk about how to cast your own personal numbers. So if you've got that pen and paper around, we can actually go through this, and I'll give you, at each stop, I'll give you a few moments to work it out. All right. So modern numerology is inspired by ancient numerology, and it suggests that there are certain numbers or certain collections of numbers from our own personal lives that we can use to create a numerology reading. If you want to look online, there are dozens and dozens of numerology profiles, numerology horoscopes, which I find is a kind of weird mix of terms, but there we go, that you can get to work out for you. But if you want to know how they are calculated, this is how they're done. If I wanted to work out the number of my name, it's not 666, thankfully, I take each of the letters and I'll assign a value from the table. So Alan is 1, yeah, A is 1, L is 3, A is 1, and N is 5. I think you can see where I got that, and I add them all up, add those numbers up, and I believe it comes to 10, if my maths is great. Two-digit numbers tend not to be used in numerology, so you reduce a two-digit numbers. 1 plus 0 equals 1. So my name number is 1. So if you very quickly want to do this for yourself and work out what your name number is for a minute, I'll give you a few moments to do that. And what I find really interesting in this system, while you're working around I'll just talk, is that in terms of planetary references, the sun is number 1. I'm also Aries, which is, yeah, so there we go. And we'll talk about what the number means in a moment. So I'll give you a few moments to look at that and actually just work out your own first name. Yeah. Okay, so somebody in the chat room that they're number 2. Thank you. See what else we got. Somebody is a 4. Oh, interesting. I won't say who's who, but you can all look at the chat room and see. Okay, we've got another 2. 2s and 4s. Okay, we'll leave it there for a minute, but I think you see how this works. It's simply addition of the numbers that the letters indicate. Once you get into double digits, you add those double digits together to make a single digit number. So say my name had come to 13, I'd add the 1 and 3 together to make number 4. Okay, it's really kind of straightforward, this bit. All right. Now, just for a moment, think about what your first name is. What does it represent? We were often given our first names by somebody else. So is the first name, that number 1 for me, is that the way I have learned to present myself to the world? Okay. Or is it some deeper intrinsic thing that the people who gave me that name felt that I would eventually be a number 1, which I don't tend to believe? But I kind of believe that I can learn something by understanding what number 1 is and what my name means. I know people who have been studying weird mystical magical stuff for a number of years who have chosen their names, sort of, if you like, they've changed their names or chosen them magically so that their number of the chosen name adds up to something that they feel or believe to be auspicious. Nothing wrong with that, because actually how we define ourselves, we can change that. That's part of evolution, right? Okay, so let's have a look at some of these other ways of looking at your name and number. Now, these may be a bit challenging for you. Some of them will be challenging for you to do very quickly, but you'll see what I'm getting at in a sec. So your life path number is actually the addition of your birth date. Okay, so in my case, I was born on the 17th of April 1958. Yes, my birthday next week. So 1, 7 plus 4 plus 1 plus 9 plus 5 plus 8 plus 8 equals 30. So my life path number is 3. Yeah. And if you were doing your own readings of this, you'd start to make a note of the life path, the personal, and the destiny numbers, because these would give you insights. So your life path number is simply your date of birth presented as a number. That one is quite a straightforward one, I think. And most of you will be able to work that one out pretty quickly, or at least remember it. The next one is even easier. Your personal number is the birthday. So in my case, it's the 17th. So 1 plus 7 equals 8. So I have a life path number of 3 and a personal characteristic number, sorry, a personal number of 8. Now we'll look at what these numbers mean in a moment, all right? But already in my numerology profile, I have a number 3 and a number 8. Yeah. Now, what's called your destiny number, which is tends to be how we express ourselves as we're getting towards our goals, is your full name. I haven't included it here, but it would be your full names. So my name technically is Alan Barclay Jones. There you go, let out a secret there. That's what the B stands for. So I should have put Barclay in there, but I didn't just for ease. So if I add up the letters, the numbers for my letters of my full name, in this case, I get 29, which equals 11. 11 reduces to 2. Yeah. So therefore, I have 3 sets of numbers: my life path number, my personal number, and my destiny number. I'm going to be quiet for a minute to let you work this out for yourself if you want to, and just so you can get some numbers. And I have put the grid on top of each page here to help you with it. Okay, we've got. Oh, yes. Suze asked a really good question there. Would you use your middle name and your maiden name? If I was doing this as a chart for you, I would ask for both. Your middle name is important, even if you don't use it, because it's the kind of name that was your initial starting point, if you like. And then your maiden name is your initial starting point, and then a married name becomes a point of change, if that makes any sense at all. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, I've read some, oops, sorry, I'll get it back. I've read some interesting numerology books that kind of suggest that, once you've got the number, you've got the number. That can't be true. It's the same way as astrology. If I tell you, as you've probably worked out from my birthday, I'm an Aries, that doesn't mean I will have the Aries traits for the rest of my life. If you like, your birth date in astrology is the starting point of your journey around the zodiac. And I have this challenge in my head about people who say, I'm a typical Aries. Well, you may not be. You may have learned and evolved from your starting point into developing the characteristics of another star sign. Yeah. Yeah, no problem. I get there's a lot of numbers and if you're not good with numbers, it's going to be a bit confusing. But as I say, this will be on I'll get the video uploaded onto the school's membership site over the weekend, so you can look at it, and I'll make sure there's some handouts that go with it, that you don't have to keep watching the video. Okay, so let's look at the next one. I need to find a way of closing this. There we go. Whoops. I'm jumping ahead of myself. There we go. So there are 2 more that are worth looking at. One is your heart number. It's the number that describes what motivates you and your inner drives, and that is simply the vowels within your name. So in this case, the vowels in my name are A, A, O, E, and they come out as 1 + 1 + 6 + 5 equals 13, which equals 4. So my heart number describes what motivates me and my inner drives. And again, quite a simple calculation. It's interesting if you wanted to use your name, your full name, and again, your maiden name, because as I said, those ideas that we evolve over time is really quite interesting. And I would if I was doing this for somebody else, and if it was somebody who changed their name at whatever point, I'd take that point of the name change as being a significant point in talking about what the numbers mean for them from that point in their change. Yeah. Try and get chat up again. Oh, so somebody just posted up there, said their full name is the same as there's a number coming up consistently for them, which is fascinating because it has significance. The more a certain number comes up, the more significance it has for you. And then your personality number, which is the image you'd like to project to the world, is the consonants in your name. Yeah, again, L, N, J, N, S are in my name. So that's 3 plus 5 plus 1 plus 5 plus 1 is 15, reduces to 6. Yeah, and I'll leave that for a minute. And one thing I'll talk about, it may not have escaped your attention, maybe it has, I don't know, that these numbers will also link, as I mentioned before, to tarot cards. So you're not going to get a 0 or a 10 out of this system, but you are going to get a 1 to 9. So if you were to look at your major arcana and you're a number 1, what does the magician give you as understanding? If you're a number 2, well, what does the high priestess in the major arcana mean to you? Or what does the 2 of coins, swords, wands, and I forgot the other one, the suits mean to you? Yeah, because the idea of the system is they're meant to overlap. I would never look at numerology in isolation to other systems that I know about. And if I can bring other systems in to help me understand whatever it is I'm trying to understand, then I would do so. What is also interesting here is that if I was ever doing readings for people, I may start with the basic numerology stuff in order to bring in things like geomancy figures, to bring in things like the tarot, to bring in things like even playing cards, right? Bearing in mind that any set of playing cards that would reduce to the same number gives me a significance. Okay. And lastly, in terms of this complicated mass number, as this thing called a derived number. It's where you add up two previous numbers. So your attainment number is the kind of number which is your spiritual conscious number. If you're into the idea of many lives and many rebirths, this number suggests about that. It suggests everything you ever were and what you're striving for in this life. And that's really your life path number plus your destiny number. And in my case, it would be 3 plus 11, which equals 14, which equals 5. Or if I'd reduce the 11 to 2, it would still be 3 plus 2 equals 5. It would be the same thing. Yeah. So the question now is, and this is where I'm going to have to go through it quite quickly, but I'm going to give you a pointer for how to start interpreting this, is if you understand what the numbers mean, then you get an understanding of how to apply the numbers to whatever description or whatever attributes that you have. All right. So I move on. So here are the key words for the first 9 numbers. And it's not that difficult to remember, really. One, first key word is independence. You are one person. 2 is feminine. Yeah. And in fact, you could go masculine, feminine, down this list. Number 3, it's about thinking and creative expression. What's 3 in the tarot? Well, it's the pregnant empress, isn't it? 2 is the high priest, S. and 1 is the magician. Yeah. 4, practicality, hard work, discipline. What's number 4 in the tarot? Well, it's actually number 4 is the emperor, the person who rules and builds. Yeah. Number 5. What's number 5? Well, 5 is the Hierophant in the tarot. 5 actually is about balancing all the control and power and early stuff into learning and into uh, being more fulfilled. 6 is the Lovers, unconditional love, ability to support and nurture and to heal. 7 is the Chariot. Chariot is constantly moving, not satisfied with similar explanations. 8 is Justice. Well, depending on what tarot deck you use, it's either Strength or Justice. But that's about measuring life goals that you reach. Justice with the scales is a perfect example there. And 9, it's towards the end of a cycle. So it's moving around the spiral of growth. So the numbers aren't that difficult to find hooks to. And if you really want to try this, my suggestion would be that you go and start to get a notebook and put number 1 on one page, number 2 on another, and start to free associate what those numbers mean to you. And then if you want to do the research about what they mean mystically or in the tarot or whatever, because again, remember that a card in the tarot that is over number 9 could still reduce to another number. So I'm just trying to think of a key example here. The Wheel of Fortune 10, 10 plus 0 is 1. New beginnings. Okay. 11 is 2. Yeah. So you could go through, and I think my message, if there is a message, any of these things we've been talking about, is you got to play with them. You have to build your own set of internal reference points. Otherwise, it doesn't become yours. It becomes something that you're trying to copy off somebody else. There's a question, I do the sessions on the tarot. Yes, I do. I've got there is a moot video on the tarot. I've also written a couple of tarot books. If you're interested, just get in touch and I'll tell you what that is. And if you want some tarot lessons, talk about that, because tarot for me is where I started, actually, sidetracking. But tarot was the first thing I was introduced in my early teens, and that's become the foundation of a lot of other stuff. Enough said. Now, there are a couple of special numbers, and those special numbers are the double-digit numbers that are 11, 22, 33, and 44. These are called master numbers. Now, in most cases, if you get an 11 or a 22 or a 33 or 44, you will reduce it by adding the digits together. So, 2, 4, 6, 8, and you go with that reading. However, these numbers can have deeper significance as indications of where you are on your journey. So number 11 is a master number, and it suggests that somebody is, or you, is developing insights. It's about spiritual and collaborative attitudes. 22 is synonymous with great minds who are self-assured and those who look to their full potential. 33 is the number that suggests leadership and I suppose in some ways teaching. And number 44 represents this kind of solid base. Remember, 4 is about base and foundations. If you think of on the Crowley Thoth Tarot, the 4 of discs is a castle that's been built, right? So it's about this foundations. So 44 represents somebody who's had practical experience of what they're teaching, have done the work, and they're now some call them master healers or master teachers or whatever. But these master numbers are quite important. If they keep coming up in a numerology reading for you, then maybe start to ask about what they really mean. how can you use all this? Well, you can go through and you do your own number chart. You can actually go through and do that. Um, and yeah, somebody said here 44 shows up a lot for them, which I think is really interesting. Sorry, I've getting the chat up. Um, and, and I think that's interesting. If it does show up a lot, then ask yourself what it means. Is it a badge of achievement? Is it a badge of desired attainment? Is it a reminder that that's where you were going? All right. Um, and the beauty of these systems is they're interpreted by the creativity of the individual and in some cases the reader, uh, because the hard and fast applications of these single meanings of these numbers, I don't think is that useful. But that's me. You may disagree, which is fine. So the very last thing I'm going to cover is the Chinese system, which is a bit easier in some ways. And I'm going to go overview this so you know, again, where to look it up, or you know that you can come back to me. And by the way, if you're not a member of the School of Mystery Magic, you know, the subscriber to all of the moots, I was going to say then why not, but of course I understand that. But you know, we've got over 20 hours of these moots up there by now, as well as I think it's 6 ebooks uh, on various things, as well as I think it's 10 books on the seasonal festivals, plus some other stuff. So, and all of that, you know, if you've got access to it, you can read all this again and hear me muttering again and probably get it clear in your head. However, coming on to the last session, the Lo Shu numerology. Well, this is the grid that you need to bear in mind. It's a magic square. Every direction adds up to 15, horizontally, vertically, diagonally. Okay, adds up to 15, which is quite cute, cool in and of itself. So you treat this grid with the numbers that tell you what numbers you're going to put in there. So, for example, my birthday, 70 the 4th, 19, oh, I said 1948 there. I'm not that old. It's 1958. Okay. Anyway, there's 2 4s there. So in the box, I'd write 2 4s where I've got them. There's obviously 1 9 for 19. There is no 2. There is no 3. There is no 5, but there is a 7. Yeah. There's no 8. Well, yeah, I say there's no, no 8. And there's 2 1s, 1 1. And so transferring my birthday to this grid would look like that little grid there, which is 44, 9, X, 7, 8, 11, 2, 11, nothing. It would be this grid I would use to interpret the Chinese numerology. And what you'd be looking for would be where numbers are repeated, so 44 and 11 in this case, where there are numbers missing in either horizontals or verticals, yeah, and they would indicate certain aspects of my life that I needed to work on. So if I show you how this works, this is where I'm not expecting you to get this down at all. I will make sure that these grids are put up with the video on the website, so you can just look at the grids without having to watch this again. But each of the columns represents a different aspect of life: thought, will, and action. If I've got no numbers in action at all, that suggests that I am inactive. I'm not doing that much. Numbers in the individual squares, so I had 2 4s, if you remember, means that I'm doing pretty well on developing my self-worth and my power and the Chinese elements there. It says luck and money. I don't know whether that's true or not. I need more 4s, I think. I did have a 9. Well, most of us would have a 9. That would be social life. Yeah. And that's how this is interpreted. But we need to remember the vertical lines are thought, will, and action. Yeah. Then The horizontal lines are mental, emotional, practical. So if I had nothing on the 357 line, yeah, then I would say there are either gaps in my emotional self, or I don't need to work on it, depending on how this system flows. And then the individual keywords for the numbers are there. Yeah. Not expecting to remember that one, because this system would be new to quite a few of you, I think. It's a system that's not tends to be not used in the West too much, but it's a system that I like personally, because it does open up this idea of lines and connections and all that kind of stuff. Again, I'll put these up on the website. They'll be underneath the video, but you can then download these images separately. And so what's the point? Well, the point in numerology is to try and find any patterns in the chaos. Um, the Pythagorean idea was that numbers show order within the universe, and to try to understand the nature of that order was what our life's task was about. I think numerology, as all of the other divination systems, are about finding meaning and connection. Yeah. So here's a fun thing to think about. If my favorite superhero was Superman, if I do the numerology of Superman or Clark Kent, his alter ego, I work out their personal name numbers. How close are they to mine? Does understanding Superman's number give me any suggestions of how I could allow myself to grow and develop? Yeah. So that's the meaning and connection. It's also personal reflection. Many of you probably know that I've spoken before. I don't think we should live according to the omens and oracles that we use. The omens and oracles are reflections of where we currently are, and what sense we make of them in the now is really important. So if I'm seeing the number 4 all the time, that may not mean anything in terms of cosmic significance, but to me, it might mean I need to look at building and being more grounded. Yeah, I need to look at my health. I would take it as a symbol, as a sign of personal reflection. And lastly, if you have personal reflection, then you can allow yourself to have intellectual and emotional exploration too. For me, one of the misunderstandings of anybody who would call themselves an occultist is to, outside of what they believe, other people think the occult is dangerous and it's hidden. Well, actually, it's only dangerous if you don't understand what you're doing and how you're exploring yourself. And it is all about what's hidden in you. It's not about what's hidden in nature. It could be about that, I suppose, but it's about what's hidden with you, your hidden potentials. The difference between some, shall we say, pagan groups that I work with is that the idea of magic being external to them, when actually magic starts from the inside and flows out. You can't cast a spell to change the world if you're not willing to change yourself. So all of these tools, and the tarot for me is really important, but numerology, astrology, gematria, I've said that one, geomancy, are really important ways to reflect on where we are. If I go for a reading, or when I used to do lots more readings in fairs and stuff, it used to not annoy me, but frustrate me that the people coming for readings were asking not for insights about where they are, but they wanted answers to questions like, does he still love me? Or am I going to win the lottery? Which I would say would be the lowest level of question there is, because it's all to do with the material. All these oracles are about aspiring to the spiritual and recognizing the connections that we have with the cosmos. And in fact, without unloading my own personal belief system here, it's about recognizing that we are this universe that we're trying to understand. And if we can't understand ourselves, how the bloody hell can we understand the universe? And that's the benefit of all these systems. And that's the end of that little bit.